should be the favorite. XiaOt is by far and away the most impressive player from China in 2018's HCT campaign. This is quite possibly the most high-profile event since the patch. We had a couple of really big events. I mean, last weekend we were both at WSOE 2 for the Hearthstone Showdown. That's right. But in terms of the sheer caliber of players and the prestige, this is the event to watch.
Currently are in this tournament.
The game. To the point where people started saying, you know what, where's the aggressive or like the fast-paced strategies? Because aggro, the very true, the full honest opinion from my perspective is that aggro doesn't really exist that much in Hearthstone. The closest thing that we have is Odd Rogue, but even then, Odd Rogue often has to play late game with like Myers and Stable Element, and then go to like 9 to 10 mana and then pull off these really big board sweeps. Or board combos, excuse me.
I guess Burn Mage would kind of live in that category as well. And we are seeing actually Burn Mage being represented quite well in this event with a lot of players that brought the aggressive lineup, choosing that as their fourth deck. So we'll be seeing that later on in the day. But for now, these players have very similar lineups. They both have even Paladin, Odd Rogue, and Spell Hunter. Both Spell Hunters have been banned away, so the difference comes in this deck from Tom, which is even Warlock, where XiaOt has an even Shaman. So that's really the big difference in their lineups.
Pretty much the even decks, the odd decks, and the cubes still are very powerful in the current metagame, but that's only because that's the low-hanging fruit. If you look a little bit deeper, there's some very interesting decks in the field, which we'll talk about as the day progresses, but for now, let's kick things off with even Paladin versus even Warlock, and both players are going to be hero powering a lot early on. That's essentially what each even deck wants to do, and this is going to be kind of one of the more even matchups that will often define the series, because even Paladin, you might think, is weak to all the AoE, like Defile and Dread Infernal, Hellfire, etc. But because even Paladin is so good at stacking the pressure, and because it doesn't matter how big of a board that you can build with Hooked Reavers and Mountain Giants, even Paladin has a quality. So it's actually very back and forth, despite the fact that you might think initially, because it's more of a token-based matchup for Paladin, that Warlock would be favored. It's not the case.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And one of the big reasons is because Paladin also does have a lot of damage from hand, which outside of Burn Mage is pretty rare in the current metagame. You talked about equality Avenging Wrath on a board, especially since even Warlock loves to flirt at low life totals, because that's just how the deck works, right? You're tapping a lot, you want to get low for Hooked Reaver, and using your life as a resource is the biggest tool that you have as an even Warlock, and equality plus Avenging Wrath, or equality plus Consecration plus push through with Blessing of Kings. Those are things that really make a difference when the Warlock's going to be at low life totals in the mid to mid-late stages of the game. So all things to look out for.
Yep, this Demonic Project is a nod to the slew of combo decks that exist out there. You're talking about Topsy Turvy Priest. You're looking at OTK Death Knight Paladin, which is like pretty important to maybe change one of their horsemen that they return back to that hand. Not going to be relevant for this series though. So for now, unless Tom's able to snipe, say, the Lich King or Tyrion Fordring from XiaOt's hand, which is a little bit of a hard read towards the late stages of the game, that's not going to be that impactful. What's going to be important is how Tom staves off that early damage to the point where, I mean, you even saw whether or not Tom wanted to life tap, because you're worried about your life total, and things like the Avenging Wrath combo that you're talking about can quickly end the game if you're not careful, even though the board is full of 1 to 3 attack minions.
And getting to that early game is actually really important, because one of the things that you want to have to do is force the Paladin to use those tools defensively instead of offensively. The earlier you force an equality, usually the better position you're in late game, because you don't have to worry about dying from damage in the later game, and you can play more to your game plan instead of playing around your opponent's game plan, which is definitely important.
Move quickly.
I mean, just look at how much XiaOt prioritizes Temple. He's playing a Wild Pyromancer, and he doesn't have the equality in hand, but it would be a really important card, and now he's utilizing his coin to set up for the best Blessing of King's turn. And I think this is a really powerful play for XiaOt, because he recognizes on 4 mana, when even Warlock's going first or on the play, is the most powerful turn for this deck, because they're trying to play Mountain Giants, trying to play Twilight Drakes, and if you're able to play Blessing of Kings on this Crystal Smith Kangor, that's very problematic for them to answer if they don't have a Spellbreaker or removal for it.
Yes. So would have set him up for the perfect way to answer a Mountain Giant and still leave a 5/6 on the board, which was why he sort of an aggressive use of the coin. But one difference, I guess, a difference in these two players' decks, and also a significant choice that you have to make in the metagame right now is whether or not to play the Spirit of the Tiger in Even Paladin, because sometimes it can end up being a card that gets clogged up in your hand or gets clogged up on the board that you can't find great uses for.
That's right.
But oftentimes what it does, it increases the amount of pressure that you gain in that mid stage of the game because of Blessing of Kings and because of Spikeard Steed.
Yeah.
Basically, specifically at that stage.
I think this could be one of the most crucial turns of this game for XiaOt. I mean, I think maybe turn 6 is also really important because that's also when even Warlock starts turning the corner with even bigger plays. Turn 6 and 8, like every even cost of turn, unsurprisingly, is really important for even decks. But you know, XiaOt choosing to preemptively trade here is fairly brilliant because he knows that there's a lot of punish if he chooses to Blessing of Kings, just the pressure.
Yeah.
But also Blessing of Kings can be punished if he plays it on just the Acidic Swamp Ooze, because you know it doesn't even answer the Twilight Drake, can just pretty much answer very easily.
Yeah.
So this is a very good split difference, or splitting the difference, and also making sure that he doesn't extend too deep into Hooked Reaver.
Yeah, that's this is a. It looks fancy, but it's a pretty easy trade to make when you really think about it, because it plays around basically both Spellbreaker and Hooked Reaver by making that preemptive damage. So
very good move.
I do like it, and just kind of textbook even Paladin Hearthstone going on right now.
Oh, interesting. I wonder how big the Shroomburger can play a role, because you know, the thing about Tom is that he doesn't want to have to use Spellbreaker if he doesn't have to.
Yes.
It's much more powerful on things like Spikeard Steed or even Tyrion as the game develops.
Yeah.
So utilizing it now feels a little bit of a waste. That being said, you know, 16 life is starting to get a little bit scary in case XiaOt just has a lot of burn damage. So this is also one of those situations where Tom has to be very careful and tread the line. And one of those things that we're talking about is, does he even life tap? And that's something that he's going to have to ask every single turn for the rest of the game. Does he want to life tap and lower his life total?
And at some point, he will need to find big stuff to do later on in the game. You know, talking about Blood Reaver Gul'dan, talking about those big board sweeps to go for swings, Hooked Reaver. I don't think he's very happy with his hand right now. He's got a very reactive hand outside of basically the Lich King. And he wants to be able to do things that are proactive, so when he does stabilize on the board, that he can drop something behind it to start applying counter pressure, because even Warlock won't win if they play reactive the entire game, most of the time.
It's not a reactive deck. I think people look at Defile and Spellstone and, you know, honestly, even Blood Reaver Gul'dan, they think, you know, or sorry, Hooked Reaver with Blood Reaver Gul'dan synergies, and they think like even Warlock should be playing, you know, a little bit slower and reactive, and it's not the case whatsoever. Even Warlock, you know, is actually one of the most aggressive decks in the metagame. Yeah. Surprisingly. You might think not, because they pretty much pass most of the time for the first few turns. But you generally just want to hit face with your minions all the time and force your opponent to react to your board state. And, you know, I think even Paladin shares very similar ideas. So, you know, I like this play from XiaOt. Doesn't get a little bit greedy, because if you play Spirit of the Tiger, one Hellfire pretty much throws your entire game plan out the window, and then Corpse Taker is even weaker. So I think this Corpse Taker play, even though you know it's just going to die, the more important thing is you get that damage going, and then XiaOt can close out the game, hopefully, by picking up some kind of a quality play, or maybe even just some weapon damage.
Yeah, if aggro control were kind of a spectrum, just a straight line across the board with aggro on one side and control on the other, even Warlock would live way further towards the aggro line than the control line.
I mean, it is a mid-range deck, but in terms of like how fast-paced it is, it's one of the more fast-paced decks in the metagame.
You want to be the player that's dictating the pace of the game.
Yeah.
Using Spellstone, Defile, and Hellfire to protect the big minions that you played first, instead of removing and then playing the big minions after.
All right, well, XiaOt is introduced with a couple of really awkward combos with two Spirits of the Tiger, and, you know, like, how do I utilize this Hydrologist? Do I weave in hero powers every single turn? But now you're also starting to enter the danger zone, because even Warlock is not only, you know, winning the board, but they have a pretty comfortable life total coming up on turn 8. And turn 8 is like the second big power turn for even Warlock, because they can drop double 4, they can drop the Lich King, or even things like, you know, if they have a Bone Mare in the list, they can just add to their existing tempo and cement their lead. So this is a very important time for XiaOt to try and navigate through, because if he doesn't, then Tom's just going to run away with this game. And now he picked up a Hook Reaver. This is just adding fuel to the fire here for Tom and putting deeper pressure onto XiaOt.
Yeah, and for Tom here, he has to sense weakness. It was a very weak turn from XiaOt, so the thing that Tom has to do now is be thinking about how much do I want to extend onto the board? How much do I want to play into in a quality clear? Right. I need to put on enough pressure so that I force something out of my opponent if they have it, so I can make that read for myself, but not too much to where if they do have it already, that I'm not going to get super punished by it and fall behind in the game.
Yep. Exactly, and I mean, he's on an odd mana cost turn. Normally, a lot of people just autopilot life tap. Oh yeah, I draw Hooked Reaver, life tap, Hooked Reaver plus, generic 2-mana play. But, you also can make, a relevant consideration. Do I just play a little bit safer?
Yeah.
Do I even Defile this Spirit of the Tiger, right? That's something that Tom was thinking about. Like, I could play Stubborn Gastropod Defile, clear off that Spirit of the Tiger, deny any big swing on the board, but then that's not even developing anything threatening. And then I might be in a similar situation, because if you end up just removing and then playing small minions, that gives even Paladin exactly what they want, which is a chance to be proactive again. So This is a very good play from Tom to split the difference once again, which is kind of what both players are balancing at this stage of the game. I feel like I've been saying that phrase a lot, splitting the difference, but that's kind of what's really important in a tempo-based matchup like this.
Yeah, and Tom forgoes the life tap because he realizes that he's got a good board state, he's got plays to make and options for the next few turns. He doesn't need to life tap right now and put him in an awkward situation.
Yeah, and this Spiker Steed might look like, wow, he just gives the Spiker Steed opportunity, but remember, he held the Spellbreaker and now can answer the board very effectively with the Hooked Reaver. This ends up being pretty nifty in almost every category. Now,
well, he's still in the situation where he has to think about how much he wants to extend on the board, but if he plays Hooked Reaver here, it does two things. Well, it actually just does one thing that ends up having two results. If XiaOt does have equality plus removal, he would 100% use it on that board.
What if he just Shroom Brews instead and then reloads after the equality? Because your opponent already used the Pyromancer, which means that they're more likely to spend almost all their mana with Equality Consecration or Equality Avenging Wrath. In that case, Hooked Reaver becomes even better post-removal.
But I was thinking Hooked Reaver might be a smart play, because if your opponent uses equality plus a clear, then you can reload with Lich King with no risk.
That's true, Lich King.
Whereas this board, I don't think this board may even warrant an equality, because you can just get away with playing, well, I don't know.
I mean, there's 13
There's 3
power.
health. There's 13 power, yeah.
But you're right in a sense. Your opponent just played Spellbreaker. You have Tyrion on 8. And if Tyrion is going to soak up some damage, yes, there's a Gastropod.
Then you follow it up.
Then you equality on even a bigger board.
Yeah. So, honestly, that play was very safe from Tom. Yeah. I actually would have liked going with something a little bit bigger. I would have just kind of jammed the Hooked Reaver. But I understand where Tom's coming from, especially Stubborn Gastropod as... I don't want to get into the trap of calling it a tech card, because I don't think it's a tech card. I think it's just a smart inclusion in even Warlock lineup, as much so as you would call Doomsayer a tech card, right? Depending on the metagame. Because it does set up on an empty board. If XiaOt doesn't equality Consecration this board, or at least just Consecration, then he can't stick a big threat going into turn 8, which would be that big turn. So
precisely. And
both of those plays kind of have merits for different reasons. One forces the equality Consecration because it's a lot of damage. The other forces equality Consecration because it's just an awkward turn. And XiaOt's response is just play it a little bit slow. I'm going to equality Consecration next turn and go for a big swing. This is really smart.
This is really smart because, like you said, and also he shuts off the ability for Defile. So if you Hellfire, you kill off your own board.
Yes.
So to deal with the second Tiger, or Spirit rather, Tom has to weigh a really tough decision. Do I extend deeper into the board? And more importantly, if I do extend deeper, what's my contingency plan? Because XiaOt, by this point, with just a play like this on turn 8, I think Tom can make the read there's an equality. And it's how do I follow this up? What's the best way to put the pressure in? First of all, we definitely want to attack with every minion to the face. That's without question.
Yeah. So, at this high level of play, at the Hearthstone All-Stars event, we can afford to be slightly nitpicky.
Right.
And I'm going to go back and say that I honestly would have liked just going a little bit further on the board and playing Hooked Reaver on the previous turn.
I mean, does Tom even play anything this turn? Does he just pass? Because XiaOt passed, and so Tom is okay if he gets to that point where if XiaOt uses removal, then he can play everything. And honestly, I don't hate this Lich King play either because it might just get damage.
Yeah.
And he might be able to just win the game through burst. So if the Lich King ends up going really big here, then XiaOt has to spend his entire turn removing and then might just die to the follow-up swing. XiaOt has a quality consecration, hydrologist, and a secret. And because he's kind of deep on the, like he's exposed to a Defile no matter what he does.
Yes.
Oh man, you can actually make a few justifications here. Repentance answers, well not answers, but helps you deal with big threats because Tom has yet to play a Mountain Giant or a Hooked Reaver. Hidden Wisdom is okay because you're pretty much lacking hand size, and if you want to go deeper into this game without all-inning, you have to have more resources. Redemption is probably the weakest long-term, but best impact immediately because you're able to at least keep your board alive and hopefully push for damage. So XiaOt says, you know what? I don't think I can go deep in this game. I think I have to try and keep my board alive as best as possible. And Redemption is exactly that.
Yeah.
Oh, also because he has Tyrion, so it makes sense.
Yeah, Redemption definitely a hold here. Makes things quite awkward, but Tom has a decent follow-up, and I honestly think if there's any turn to rip Demonic Project,
right,
it would probably be this turn. So you Defile, Hooked Reaver, and then Demonic Project. Because XiaOt, well, I don't know, because you could make the read that XiaOt's hand is just all non-minions, right? Because he made such a weak play on the previous turn with just Spirit of the Tiger. Granted, there was a Stubborn Gastropod on the board.
Yeah. No, I agree. I kind of like the Demonic Project, but the problem is, too, that a lot of these minions are very good for what you want to do. Like, for example, if he lost his Shroom Brewer.
Yeah, Sunfree Protector, I feel, is pretty weak.
Jeez. So now you have Tyrion or Lich King as a redemption target. Your opponent already has used a Silence.
Then the question for XiaOt is, do you trade in the 4-1?
I mean, I think the question for XiaOt is he going to die next turn? Yeah, this is a really scary position to be in because almost every Lich King card is extremely threatening. Army of the Dead is just one of the most powerful cards in even Warlock because you can just pull out like 2 giants and a ridiculous amount of stuff. But, you know, almost every other card, too, is threatening. You have damage through Frostmourne and Death Coil. You have Obliterate, which can get past the Taunt minion really easily and then push damage. And then you have, like, you know, Death Grip, which is, like, the weakest, but that's the least likely. So how does XiaOt survive while developing and even formulate a game plan? And I think it has to do with just taking a defensive measure, which is Tyrion and Redemption. Also has to not hero power. But by not hero powering, again, XiaOt's playing with his cards face up. Yeah. And Tom knows exactly what this is.
There is a second Spellbreaker in the deck. Tom has played 1. He does run 2. But from Tom's perspective, actually, if he taps for Hellfire, or if he taps and gets Spellbreaker, it would be guaranteed lethal because he could check for every secret. I mean, it'd basically just be Noble Sacrifice, but then he could Hellfire after it because he'd have plenty of mana.
In a way, Tom doesn't have to, you know, do too much. Even Paladin still has to present their own threats.
Yeah.
So if you can trade and then not have to active Redemption, I'm sure that's something that he's thinking about.
Yeah.
And he's not trading, forcing XiaOt to make the difficult decision. 2 Choose Over Champions, that's the worst draw in XiaOt's deck right now, I would say.
The absolute worst because he's banking on this Tyrion dying getting Ashmere anyway. He does have Lich King, though, which is probably one of the best cards in his deck. Maybe not at the current point in time. He'd much rather those True Silver Champions be in Equality and Avenging Wrath.
Let me think.
XiaOt survive if he drops Lich King and passes. And I don't think he does, because there's Hellfire and Spellstone to help get through everything.
Yeah.
So what you end up doing is trading to Lich King and then killing it off and then just having the Mountain Giant finish it. So I think XiaOt, I think he's cornered here. He doesn't have that extra turn. So unless Tom, I think, messes this up sequentially, XiaOt should be dead.
Well, this could be auto defense matrix still from Tom's perspective because the Tyrion already had Divine Shield.
Right.
It can't get Divine Shield again.
Okay.
So Tom has not, he's pretty much narrowed it down to Hidden Wisdom, auto defense matrix, Eye for an Eye, and Redemption.
So he's only eliminated like 2.
He's eliminated 2. He's eliminated Repentance and Noble Sacrifice.
Right. And I think with this hero power, XiaOt might be trying to throw off Tom, saying like, okay, it has to be auto defense matrix.
Yes.
So this is a very clever, like small 1% play.
All right, so now he's got word that it is Redemption. So just with Hellfire plus Spellstone, this is enough for him to push through.
Yes, guaranteed.
Yeah.
I'm going to be able to take game 1, and a crucial one at that, because let me tell you, even Warlock is the weakest deck statistically from Tom's lineup.
Yes.
Because Odd Rogue is very favored against it, Spell Hunter was favored, and then he had to ban it. And even against Even Paladin, it's considered the slight underdog. So overall, it was his weakest deck, and now that it's off the board, things are looking good for our reigning world champion. But remember, this was a very close matchup. XiaOt's edge is not...
It's almost like it's scripted, Dan.
Well, that being said, you know, I gotta say that even though XiaOt lost that game, he was making some really good plays.
Exceptionally.
I think the Spear of the Tiger Pass was quite possibly, you know, the most impressive play.
The best Hearthstone play of our generation.
Well, I was gonna say the best play that I've seen this month. You know, I've casted a lot of Hearthstone, specifically in December, and it's like I play was very impressive for many reasons, and it didn't go his way, but you know that's kind of the nature of these very close matchups. When they're 52-48 at best. It's like, you know, you can't really ask for much more when you're XiaOt side. Now, that being said, his hand for this game is looking really bad. You have Flame Tongue Totem, which is fantastic if you're on the play, but, you know, Calamos and Sea Giant is not going to be something very relevant in an Odd Rogue matchup that's going to be using his hero power to eliminate all your board all the time.
Yeah.
He needs something pretty big. Like, he needs the Primal Fin Totems. He needs, you know, things like the Serenite Chain Gangs as the game continues to develop and stop the early game momentum. And on Tom's side, his hand's also a little bit awkward too. It's lacking like proactive plays. It's got a lot of reactive plays instead. Yeah. Oh, Primal Fin Totem for XiaOt.
Oh, that's an Earthen Might.
Yeah, Earthen Might's also a very good candidate because it becomes a 4 health minion. Your opponent can't easily deal with it.
Earthen Might is also a card that people just... I feel like Earthen Might falls into the same category as Wild Pyromancer, where people tunnel on the effect and don't realize that it's just pretty good, right? You can just play Earthen Might on anything. Who cares if you don't get the elemental value? A lot of times, either you're going to win or lose before the value from the elemental would even make a difference.
Yeah, it's Blessing of Kings, but with an additional benefit.
Yeah.
Scaled down, of course. You know, 2-mana 2/2 buff instead of a 4-mana 4/4 buff.
But honestly, I'd rather have a 2-mana 2/2 buff than a 4-mana 4/4 buff at many stages of the game.
Yeah.
Especially when you're fighting against an early deck like this one, and XiaOt just trying to force basically a dagger hit onto this 2/3 because then he gets to drop a Primal Fin Totem and Totem up himself. And then if he sticks Primal Fin and Flame Tongue at the same time, you have 2 high priority targets. The one thing that the Odd Rogue does struggle with is wide board states because a lot of times they rely on 1 or 2 minions to snowball the game with their dagger as support. And if you present 4 or 5 smaller targets, then it becomes hard for them to control the size of the board and hard for them to control the pace of the game.
Yeah. That being said, Tom has one of the best tools against that with Void Ripper. So Primal Fin Totem and a 0/2 Totem here. Oh, that's actually a really big deal.
That's it. Yeah, surprisingly, you never...
Tom, he is shaking his head. He's like, good Lord, I just wanted that to not be the case.
Yeah. It's such a small, like, innocuous thing, but it makes, like, such a big difference because any minion sticking on the board
makes
can be detrimental.
Better. Yeah, it makes Fangtum better. It makes things like Firebloom Phoenix better.
Yep.
And so, you know, like XiaOt, he's rewarded for his building block play. This is like one of those things where people are going to tunnel in on the 1 out of 4 with Shaman. And you know, to make no mistake, XiaOt was lucky to get that. But more importantly, he stabilized the board so that way Tom doesn't stick like an extra Argent Squire. So that way things like Firefly Coldblood won't punish him. So that way things like a dagger hit will answer a Flame Tongue Totem without anything else that he can do. And so these are like the important things you need to do as even Shaman so that if you do get fortunate, you can just lock the game right there. But, you know, obviously with Tom's hand, with double Vile Spine Slayer, Anti-7 Agent, I feel like he's just going to still be able to answer whatever XiaOt plays here.
Yeah. And these are some of those turns that become at least slightly difficult for XiaOt. It's about resource management, when you need to go in on the board and play your strongest stuff, or when you need to pace things out.
Yeah.
And like say totem up and then weave in another totem next turn with the Menacing Nimbus.
Yeah.
But he realizes that he needs power right now.
Wow. That Sassy deckhand is actually fairly important because the moment Tom's able to set up a dagger, he can start doing some big combos, or even just the fact that he has it available from turn 6 onwards is going to be super strong to answer things because the Vile Spine Slayers are really important to answer things like XiaOt's big swing turns with Sea Giant, Fire Elemental, and Calamos. Which at this point XiaOt has weathered a little bit of the storm. His job's not done yet, but if he can get to that late stage of the game, Calamos might be his trump card, and then Tom has the answer to that trump card with Vile Spine. Deadly Poison. So I'm looking at Fungalmancer, which just looks really clean in this position. You get the trade with the Dire Maul onto the Flame Tongue Tome. You get the 5/5 overtrade on the Elemental.
Left with a 3/5, a 2/2, and a 5/1 against a 0/2 totem, which seems like a pretty fantastic board.
Yeah. It is a little bit weak to Fire Elemental because the Fire Elemental will answer the SI7 agent very cleanly.
But can you make a play that plays around Fire Elemental to the maximum potential? And also, if you don't play Fungalmancer this turn and Fire Elemental comes down, do you have a good Fungalmancer follow-up?
Yeah.
And actually, I think the answer would be yes. I think Vile Spine Slayer could have been serviceable, and you drop an extra 2/1 on the board, but I don't know. I think this play is just the obvious one. It's just the easiest one to make.
Yeah, I think this is the obvious one, but also his plays are still really varied on the next turn because he still kept his coin this entire game.
Yes.
So like next turn, for example, he doesn't have to like play Southsea Vile Spine. He could like coin Vile Spine with the dagger, hold on to the dagger, Deadly Poison, Southsea Vile Spine the following turn for 7 mana, and eventually just like push for damage and start making his march for victory. So I think Tom keeping this coin for a long time has been very nice and convenient. He hasn't had too many opportunities to even use it very effectively outside the coin SI7 agent. But, things are looking still really good for Tom in this position. At least at first glance. I mean, if you look...
He hasn't put a single point of damage onto XiaOt, which is worrying because even Shaman does get pretty strong as the game goes late. They have a lot of big bombs. They have a lot of things that you want to Vile Spine Slayer. Fire Elemental, Sea Giant, Calamos, the Lich King. A lot of big stuff. Even, like Argent Commander could sometimes be quite awkward because of the Divine Shield.
Oh my, that's just so good. Dire Maul is exactly what Tom is looking for. The best possible 1-mana minion for 1 mana. Now XiaOt has to set up a Calamos turn, but it's looking a little trickier with each passing minute. He picks up the Earthen Might.
Well, Menacing Nimbus has to come down this turn to set up for Calamos.
Yes.
And so the obvious play that jumps out to me is getting down the Sea Giant with it because you just saw Vile Spine Slayer.
Okay.
But maybe he could do something creative here. Nah, don't try and get creative. Just play the Sea Giant. You can hero power Sea Giant, yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. I don't think there's any spell damage in XiaOt's deck. He picks up Cosmic Anomaly, which gives him +2 spell damage off the Battle Cry for Menacing Nimbus. And I don't think there's anything directly. The best way to possibly use that is like Lich King or Hagatha. Lich King can give you Death and Decay. Hagatha can give you any spell from Shaman.
One of the other things we didn't talk about is XiaOt actually has 2 Scarab Eggs.
Oh yeah, Scarab Egg is a 2-mana 0/2 that summons 3 1/1 Scarabs upon Death Rattle.
It's kind of a weird minion because a lot of times you just don't want to kill it, but of course even Shaman has a lot of ways you can activate it with Direwolf Alpha, Earthen Might, Flame Tongue Totem. Even like Merc Sparkule, you could just Merc Sparkule it and...
Precisely. By the way, Tom, very cognizant of the fact that turn 8 is Calamos or it's going to be Hagatha. It's just 3 damage AoE across the board. he has to be careful to set up the best possible board against exactly that. Although with this coin SI7 agent, seems like he's going to toss a little bit more into the fire to maximize his damage. But still, 3 minions are going to survive. He has 9 damage post Calamos. With 2, 4, 6 follow-up. So he's going to have 15. And XiaOt will be on 5 life or less. Unless he finds a better alternative to this Calamos, which I don't think it is. Calamos removes 6 power on the board, which is very much needed.
Well, Fire Elemental plus Merc Spark Eel does give you multiple attacks. You can still follow it up with Calamos. It takes 1 less power off the board.
Yeah, that's true. The thing is, though,
does it take more power off over time? I think the answer is still no. I think Calamos just makes more sense.
The thing I like about Calamos, too, is it gets out that need to have that Elemental. It's a 7/7 that helps you trade, and also it weakens everything, so Merc, Spark, Eel, and Fire Elemental can pick apart the board the following turn.
Yeah.
So this Invocation of Air was fairly straightforward. Tom knew this was coming, and now just needs a little bit more damage. Leroy Jenkins,
Whoa.
Is that lethal? 9 plus 6 plus 4? It's a Twitch chat lethal. If he had a little bit more mana, I think he'd be able to get over the hump.
Yeah.
But he's just shy.
He has the damage for lethal, just not the mana. But at this point, I mean, it's pretty much Hagatha or bust for XiaOt.
Yeah.
And even beyond that, because of the recurring damage that Tom will have with the dagger, he needs even a little bit more help.
Yeah, because he loses access to his taunt totem. This is a tough matchup. Odd is pretty favored. This is one of the more one-sided matchups. In fact, it is the most one-sided matchup in this entire spread in favor of Tom because Spell Hunter has been banned on both sides.
Yeah.
Holds on to Leroy, doesn't want to give extra 1/1s to potentially allow good trades. Sea Giant comes into the hand for XiaOt. That's not what he's looking for.
This was, I'm pretty sure, a no-win scenario outside of Corpse Taker.
Well, he has Earthen Might. Maybe that can pull an elemental that we're not thinking about.
I don't think there's an elemental that pulls him out of this. I think he needed exactly Corpse Taker for the heal, because even Hagatha would have spent all of his mana. He would have gone up to 12. He would have cleared the board, but Tom had exactly 12 damage sitting in hand with the 4 damage dagger loaded up plus 8 from hand, so...
Yeah, I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head very well. Even Shaman can eventually win the board very convincingly because of how wide it goes, but XiaOt just wasn't given enough time, and Odd Rogue able to press in just enough, despite the fact that Tom didn't have, the most aggressive hand with double Vilespine and Void Ripper. It ends up working out very well against Even Shaman, excuse me.
Whoa, Odd Shaman's a whole nother box to open.
It works really well against Odd Shaman. Let me tell you, Odd Rogue versus Odd Shaman
Great
is like
matchup.
a 90-10 matchup.
Yeah. You don't care about Totemic Slam at all.
I'm able to wrap up game 2. XiaOt on his elimination point. Remember, this is single elimination. This is an All-Stars event. We're not doing ACT group stages. Win or go home. And, Tom has a little bit of that advantage because going into this, he's
just basic statistics, right?
I mean, he is. Like, Tom's on the play. This is a really big difference.
Yeah.
Ooh, I want to see the Scarabée can make a huge impact. And also, Sea Giants do end up playing a pretty big factor for the swing turns that you mentioned.
Yes. Even Paladin, I think, more so, at least in the early game. Then Odd Rogue does flood the board more, so allows for earlier Sea Giants. But it is pretty even. Get it?
Yeah.
Because they're even decks.
You lost me.
They play the card Gen Greymane, which makes so they're only playing even cost cards.
That upgrades your hero power, right?
Upgrade your hero power?
Yeah.
So I said this matchup's pretty even. Get it? Because even cost cards, even Paladin, even Shaman, matchup's even.
You even play Hearthstone,
It's a double entendre.
I'm not following you, but let's go ahead and jump into game number 3 here. We got Even Paladin versus Even Shaman. And thanks to the Gen Gray main reducing the cost of their hero powers, XiaOt is going to be able to fight back for the board pretty easily here. But, you know, I want to see the use of the Scarab Egg.
Just coin it out.
I mean, there's actual reason to do that because his curve is pretty sick. He's got Merc Sparkule, he's got Flame Tongue Totem, so the moment he wins the board, which seems to be as soon as this turn,
yeah.
He's going to be in a pretty significant advantage. Choose instead the hero power. Hey, guess what? I'm the Even Paladin now. Yeah, you know, if you can just summon 1/1s this entire time, I would say that Even Shaman's like even more than a 60-40 favorite. It might be like a 70-30 favorite.
If Spell Power Totem just didn't exist, Even Shaman would be the best deck in the entire metagame.
Yeah. Just, you know, a little bit too late for Spirit Claws there. You know, Spirit Claws going to 2 mana.
Yeah.
The Even Shaman weapon of choice. Probably not. It's just something to think about, but...
You still have, what is that? Lickum?
Lickum, you're right.
But Lickum's bad in Even Shaman because you don't play many Overload cards. All the good Overload cards for Shaman are odd.
Well, there's Stoneforge Axe. I still think that card's pretty underrated.
Yeah.
It's not amazing, but it's definitely not as terrible as people think it is.
Yeah, but like Lightning Bolt, Lava Burst, anything that you want to play in a semi-aggressive deck, even Lightning Storm, Volcano.
Well, there's not many, like...
You can play Zap.
Well, when you play Stoneforge Axe and Even Shaman, you're just like, why am I not just playing Odd Rogue?
Yeah.
You're just like, I have access
to... I have to pay a card and effectively 3 mana to do the same thing that Odd Rogue gets just for putting a dumb card in their deck.
Yeah, there's also a lot of 2 mana 2/3s out there in the meta. Or just things that like 2 attack weapons don't kill. Because Odd Rogue has phased out most of that. Odd Rogue just single-handedly pushed out a lot of those 2 health minions. That being said, let's kind of focus on what XiaOt is doing here. This is why we feel like Even Shaman has a lot of... It's like, so here's the thing, you know? I look at Scarab Egg, and I'm like, why am I not just playing this against a deck that has AoE and wants to remove my board? But that's why Even Shaman, in my opinion, has so much nuance to it because, like, I see so many players disagreeing on what, like, the good plays are.
Yeah.
I would have played Scarab Egg, you know, 3 turns ago. And now, XiaOt, he picks up Lich King, so he has his top end secured. This is looking very good for him so far, as long as he's able to keep Tom's board in check, which is pretty much goal number 1. Even Shaman is not as focused on pushing the damage compared to, say, Even Paladin, because Even Paladin does want to utilize the damage to eventually win the game.
Even Shaman can win by damage, but it's predicated upon sticking Flame Tongue Totem earlier and your opponent not being able to kill it.
So, you know, this is a position where I think XiaOt wish he played the Scarab Egg, because then he'd be able to use Flame Tongue Totem, push, have as many minions on board, and I don't know, but like maybe that would lead him to an easier Siege Giant, even on the following turn. But you know, still it's still fine because I think he wouldn't have enough damage to answer, say, the Glass Knight, and he wants to make sure to answer Corpse Taker, which I think is his #1 priority. Yes. So this makes sense from XiaOt's perspective. It's just, you know, on my side, it takes a lot of discipline to not pull the trigger on a new card that you're playing to try to show off to people. Yep. Straight up, it's just very hard to maintain discipline sometimes.
Yeah, it's just psychology, right?
I'm sure a lot of people on the internet have PhDs in exactly that science. So.
Yeah. I mean, I know at least 100 people on Twitch right now that have degrees in psychology and statistics at the same time. You know who you are.
Yeah, you're talking about me.
Yeah.
Well, you know, for XiaOt's perspective, Flame Tongue Totem looks really good, especially if you pop the Scarab Egg, you get a free Siege Giant. The only problem is that you also want to avoid the Equality Consecration turn. Turn 6 unlocks that ability for them to clear the board. So how does XiaOt best respond to this? Is it just Flame Tongue pass? Or is it just Flame Tongue don't trade the Scarab Egg and then Siege Giant?
But it's also a catch-22 because if you forever play around Equality Consecration, you'll never know if your opponent really has Equality Consecration.
Right. Then they don't need Equality Consecration.
Then they don't need Equality Consecration.
Right. You've effectively given them other plays that they don't have.
You've effectively given them an Equality Consecration by playing around it for so many turns.
Yeah.
So I do like just sometimes going for it. Just say, I'm going to drop a big threat. If you have it, you have it. If you don't, I know that you don't. Boom, psychology.
Well, now it's still kind of the same thing. Even if Tom had a quality, this is not exactly a great setup for it. It'd be okay, but you still leave your opponent aboard. You know, that taunt totem ends up being pretty valuable if Tom had the consecration and equality. He has neither. So it ends up working out okay for both players. Like in XiaOt's mind, he's like, great, now, you know, equality consecration is protected. And then Tom's like, well, that's okay, I didn't have it anyways. It's annoying because obviously if the taunt totem wasn't there, he'd be able to get a really good trade on the Sea Giant with Argent Commander.
Yeah.
Now we also enter a very difficult phase for Tom too, because some things like Sunkeeper Tarim and Spiker Steed are extreme liabilities, because Sunkeeper Tarim improve your opponent's board to a certain extent, and Spiker Steed can get hexed.
Well, it's about the best play that Tom could make. The only play that really allowed him to push past the Flame Tongue Totem.
Right. And
outside of True Silver Champion, but that's way too slow. Now looking at the hands, I mean, XiaOt, he's got so much good stuff.
He's got good stuff, but he also still doesn't have to do too much onto the board itself. Like right now, I think the very clear, easy play for maximum power is Fire Elemental, but he is kind of playing directly into that equality setup. And, you know, XiaOt just played Even Paladin and demonstrated patience as well. Both players have 30 life. So you're very okay if you're Tom to just like take 8 damage, even 2 turns in a row from the Even Shaman. So if that's the case, if I'm XiaOt, I think I'm going to take a slow right back. Maybe just play it with Mark Spark Eel on the Glass Knight and then push phase. And then that's it.
Yeah. No, I think that's a fair point.
Wants to go a little bit further? Okay. I mean, now this, in XiaOt's mind, saying this probably warrants some kind of AoE clear. Getting Greymane. Not the best pickup. Usually a very bad draw. And I think for Tom's perspective, he's thinking, I drew a lot of like the cards that I want to stay in my deck. Like I put Gen Greymane and Wind Fury Heartbeat so that they cannot be drawn, and I can get the benefits of them being in the bottom of my deck.
Yeah.
And now he's also caught in a tough spot where if he ends up going for Spiker Steed, he just gets blown out. If he goes for Sunkeeper Tarim, he's gonna have to accept that he's giving his opponent an offensive way to close the game.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think this is just looking really bad for Tom, and I don't see a way out for him, a way out in the next few turns here.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't understand why players are still putting Gen in even decks. It just seems like such an understated card for its cost.
Yeah, you just draw it. It's not worth it just to upgrade your hero power.
No.
Let's move quickly.
Such a mistake.
The biggest misplay of all.
Reporting for duty.
Sacred Steed separating the target so that way if the Hex comes down, it's not as big of a loss to lose the 4/2 Divine Shield. Now in XiaOt's mind, is it time to pull the trigger on one of his biggest bombs yet, the Lich King, or does he take it a little bit slower still?
Well, he has the Hex for the Spiker Seed target, and looking at the lineup for the deck list for Tom, the Hex target would basically be Lich King, Tyrion, and anything that's Spiker Seeded, right?
Right.
He is going into turn 8, but he's thinking that by hexing now, he's going to have enough of a board lead to where dealing with those other 2 minions wouldn't be as big of a deal.
Yeah. You can also deal with this Argent Commander fairly effectively as well. Like the Crystal Smith can go keep Divine Shield, not that important. What is important is he's pushing this 8 damage every turn, and Tom does not have an answer to it. Standing Chain Gang, that's actually a pretty good draw. Because Tom needed to stop the 8 damage from face, and then what ends up happening is he can now use his True Silver Champion to take down 2 targets and make Sunkeeper Tarim a little bit better.
Yeah.
So this is manageable. Not great, but manageable. If I'm XiaOt, do I kind of just accept that Tom doesn't have an equality at this point?
I think you're safe to do that. They've been kind of awkward because of the Scare Bag and because of the Divine Shield last turn. You'd really be just targeting the Sea Giant. Coin Earth and Might to push.
Yep. Also,
8
you
damage
get an
to
elemental
face.
too, right?
No.
Oh,
Crystal Smith Kangor is not an elemental.
you're right. I was thinking so.
It was yellow because the Flame Elemental's on board.
Yeah. I was thinking
fire
because I saw
elemental,
it, but like, 'cause it was highlighted, I'm like, oh, it's Crystal Smith King or an elemental.
I was second guessing myself earlier. I was like, why
Yeah.
isn't that Earth and Might yellow? Or
Yeah.
orange or gold, whatever you want to call it. I don't know.
Whatever color
Where's
that
Kibler?
Brian Kibler eventually tells us that he can't see.
Yeah. Dan, did you know that Brian Kibler's colorblind? Did you also know that he has a dog?
Really?
Yeah.
What are you gonna? What's next? You're gonna tell me he likes dragons? Hey, he's like the most handsome guy in Hearthstone. XiaOt, does he have lethal right here? 1, 2, 3. No, very close.
1 damage off, or 2 damage, depending on how you look at it. 1 damage to get through the Sunkeeper to push through, 2
And,
damage
you know,
if you have to trade all 3.
Without Corpse Taker, Tom just does not have a very easy way to heal now that he's used his Choose Over Champion. His Crystal Snake Hangor is going to be useless for the most part. Scarabag, by the way, has not popped this entire game, which just shows you the layers of which XiaOt was prepared to answer Tom's best answers himself.
Yeah.
He was ready to go 1 level deeper, like the Corridor Creeper. And just to add insult to injury, that's one of the cards Tom would have loved to have in this matchup. We're going to game 4, but that's just the first step of this marathon known as the comeback for XiaOt. Can he continue this? It's going to be tricky because his best matchup remaining is the Even Paladin Mirror. And if that's your best matchup, it's looking bad.
Yeah, even Paladin just such a strong part of the metagame right now. It's one of the best ladder decks. It's one of the best tournament decks. Beating that deck 3 times in a row, especially one of those being a mirror and one of those being an okay matchup, I suppose. It's tough. It's very tough.
Yeah.
It's a tall task.
Precisely. Now, you know, it looks like he's going with Odd Rogue instead. And, you know, XiaOt has things like Iron Beak Owl, so that could help him a lot in this matchup because of things like Spike Rich D, which could lock out the game.
Yeah, one thing that we didn't mention about Tom's Odd Rogue, which he's already taken a win with, was that he had 2 copies of Snapdraw Shell Fighter in the deck. It's a 5-mana 3/8 that whenever a Jason minion takes damage, the Snapdraw Shell Fighter, Jesus, that's hard to say, takes the damage instead.
It's almost like, you know, Tom got the Invitational Challenge. Like, you have to put, like, a few cards of the new expansion in. It's like, okay, I'll put in the Snapjaw Shell Fighter.
And that's it.
Yeah, but I'm saying a couple cards.
Yeah.
You know, I'll put Spirited Tiger in, etc. But XiaOt
Oh, and other
has,
decks. Okay, yes.
Oh, wow. Okay, so he has a fantastic early game. Odd Rogue's best turn 1, turn 2 has always been things, whatever, like turn 1 into Cold Blood.
I mean, that's just Rogue's best.
Right.
Everything has been always 1-drop into
Tempo
1-drop
Rogue,
Cold
Miracle
Blood.
Rogue,
Yeah.
you name it. But, you know, even Paladin being able to go first makes a huge difference. Like, now you get to see, like, the difference between... Like, people are like, is it really that big of a difference? Like, I like having the coin. Having the coin's really nice and convenient. No, going first is so insanely good when you're playing, like, especially an odd rogue or an odd costed deck that wants to be aggressive. You get that turn 1 before your opponent can respond.
If you have a 1-drop as odd rogue, yeah.
Right. But imagine the roles are reversed. You know, XiaOt goes first with Firefly, Tom Hero Powers, Flame Elemental Cold Blood. What do you do? Equality?
I don't know. You would have the coin Secret Wild Pyromancer coin.
Yeah, I guess, but, you know, that's not great.
Not great, no. Because Wild Pyromancer is a big tool.
Yeah, and they've already got their damage in, which is the most important aspect of this.
They got the average amount of damage that Cold Blood does, or close to the average.
Nick Swampoos, that is a fantastic draw to slow down XiaOt's momentum. XiaOt's like, okay, I knew that was going to happen. There's 2 acidic Swampooses in most Even Paladin lists. And it's something that they will mulligan for and keep if they have it.
Yep, and Tom's is no exception. He does have the 2 acidic swamp oozes.
Vilespine Slayer, Iron Beak Owls, SI7 Agent. XiaOt's not going to fall behind on board this game, at least for the first few turns. But this is also a very crucial turn, too. Does he once again take turn to set up a weapon so that things like Hench Clan Thung get better? Does he utilize his SI7 Agent and part ways with the coin, just so he can win a little bit more tempo? How does he respond to a Corpse Taker on 4? Which is usually warranting things like the Vilespine Slayer or some combination of board and weapon. This is all kind of tricky for XiaOt's mind right now.
Or Blessing Him Kings.
Yeah.
If he leaves a minion on board.
I think it's painful, but going slow is not a bad thing against even Paladin because they can respond very quickly. So Dagger and Flame Elemental here is perfectly reasonable in my mind. You still get to go for a Hench Clan Thug, and you also keep your options open in case you need to go for a Vilespine Slayer.
Yeah. He does leave himself open to a Blessing of Kings here, though.
Yeah, the no trade means Blessing of Kings can come down, but also that's why he has Vilespine Slayer.
He does, but Vilespine Slayer also has a lot of good targets. Let's say you trade that 1/1 in, then that makes Tom's turn very awkward.
Okay.
Because he can't play Blessing of Kings at all. So he either True Silver Champions a 1/2, he plays Corpse Taker, which you'd be in the same position as you would Blessing of Kings. You just...
Ooh, I like this too. This actually sets off the Coin Fungalmancer to for a very good trade.
Oh yeah, it does.
So I was like, yeah, push that damage. But, this is a great preemptive trade from Tom because the matchup, while damage is really important for both decks because they want to press in for the victory, board control matters almost like the entire game up until that point. Odd Rogue, how many times have we seen Odd Rogue struggle, can't do anything for 6 turns? Their opponent's at 25 health, then they Myras, and then they win in 2 turns.
Yes.
It's how many times did that happen because they just have double Cold Blood and a South Sea Captain.
Yeah.
Or South Sea Deckhand, excuse me.
The biggest challenge for Odd Rogue, I feel like, is resource. Right? It's finding enough resources to keep control of the board and also push damage.
Right. And
that's why Myers is such a powerful card in the deck because it solves every problem.
XiaOt was rewarded too. He picks up that Argent Squire, something we didn't talk about, that enables the SI7 agent. His discipline, his patience is going to be rewarded, and because he has 2 minions on board, this Fungalmancer is at max power while having a Divine Shield minion on the board. Tom does have all 3 forms of removal with Wild Pyromancer, Quality, and Consecration, but this is going to be tricky, to say the least, if XiaOt keeps pressing in with more damage turn after turn.
Yeah. He hasn't put on much pressure yet, but think back to the match the game that Tom played with his Odd Rogue against Even Shaman, which is kind of similar, where you fight for board for a while, and then all of a sudden, something happens, Rogue pushes a ton of damage in a single turn, and then you're in Leroy, you're in Deadly Poison range, you're in South Sea Deckhand Cold Blood range, those kinds of things. So it may not look like he's pressuring much, because right now he just has 2 measly 1/1s on board.
What do you think about going super ham this turn? You could Hench Clan Thug, Cold Blood, and Dagger. Is that just too much? Is that too all in on turn 6?
You don't have a 1-drop after that or coin, so Vilespine Slayer gets stranded at least from your hand until turn 8. I'm not saying that's a reason to not go for it. Yeah. I'm saying that's something you need to think about if you're gonna have something.
I want to coin Cold Blood. This Argent Squire. I know you lose the Vilespine Slayer, but I just really want to get damage in. Oh wow. Okay, so XiaOt was thinking about the trades with the Argent Squire.
He's playing around Consecration.
Yeah, he's playing around Consecration, but not Pyromancer Consecration.
Yeah, but that's 2 pieces. I say you can... He still pushes 3 damage either way if he trades. He pushes the same amount of damage. One play plays around one thing, one play plays around 2 things. I don't know.
If he trades with the Firefly, he forces Tom to use the True Silver Champion, though.
That's true. That's very true, actually.
And now, because the True Silver Champion exists, XiaOt's development is once again stunted. I think, I completely understand what XiaOt's thinking with the Consecration play around. Okay, I'll have 2 minions survive, and maybe I can keep pushing. But this was pretty much the ideal punish from Tom, and I think XiaOt may have kind of gamed himself. I think he thought a little bit too deep into it, and as a result, gave Tom the exact best play to turn the tides. And now this game is completely back in Tom's control.
Yeah, when you have the lead on the board, it's not about playing around a specific thing. It's about playing around the one or two things that lose you the game, not playing around a wide range of things, right? Because if Consecration had come down, yes, he would have lost the board, but he would have forced a True Server champion. There would have been a 1-1 left on board for Tom, so XiaOt still would have been in the driver's seat. But by going with this play, he gave Tom a perfect use for Wild Pyromancer Consecration and holding on to True Silver, which now means that he's a turn behind instead of even or a turn ahead.
Well, here's the thing, too. Equality is like the key piece to all of that. Like, if you want to choose one of the 3 cards to hold on to, it's Equality. You're okay with parting ways with Pyromancer. You're okay parting ways with Consecration, but Equality is like the real key because XiaOt at this point might have to rely on something like Myra's in order to finish out the game. And Tom has the ultimate answer to that.
Yeah.
And also, XiaOt's been using his life total very effectively to stabilize on the board and get advantage. But now it could get to the point where Tom's just going to win because XiaOt took too much damage in the process.
Yeah. And I mean, I think we've been saying this a lot of time, but another smart play by Tom, because in this matchup, you want to use the Spike Ridge Steed on a minion that's attacking that turn, so you get immediate value out of it. Otherwise, you're vulnerable to Vilespine Slayer, you're vulnerable to Iron Beak Owl, which at this point, Tom saw Dagger Up, Vicious Fledgling, pass, right?
Yeah,
so he knows that his
so
hand
bad.
is very situational.
Right.
So the possibility that he has Vilespines and or Iron Beak Owl are very high. So this spreads out his targets. It also means that next turn he'll be able to play Spike Ridge Steed or whatever and get immediate value out of it instead of being punished by going Hero Power Spike Ridge Steed and trying to save the Tarim for a more greedier case.
I completely agree with that. Like, because of the reactive plays with Vilespine Slayer and the Owl, Steed was not a good choice in this position.
Yeah.
And, you know, this Tar Creeper, I think, is quite a blessing in disguise. It's not a very aggressive card, but what it starts doing is kind of protect other minions and allows him to push damage if he's able to utilize Iron Beak Owl plus the Cold Blood next turn.
Yeah.
So this can still work. In fact, XiaOt has the ability, this is like his last window of opportunity.
Yeah.
Actually, hold on. Tom drew the second Spike Ridge Steed. Oh, jeez. All right, I think I take that all back. I think with that second draw of the Steed, Tom is overwhelmingly favored in this position if he wasn't already.
Yeah, and also at this point, if Tom at any point in the game draws Avenging Wrath, it's almost a guaranteed win because he's got Valenier in hand. XiaOt's at 15. So the 2 swings plus the Avenging Wrath equality is nearly enough to just end the game on the spot. Without even mentioning the fact that equality plus Avenging Wrath with XiaOt having very little resources also is just a backbreaker.
That being said, if we focus only on XiaOt, he has another decision if he wants to just go all in with Cold Blood or Fungalmancer, and I think he recognizes that this is probably his last chance to do so. Is he going to Dagger Up or is he going to Cold Blood? Okay.
He's going with the Dagger Up.
Right. So it's a split the difference play. He's still not sure about what Tom can do going into 9 mana.
I don't know, Dan. In these kinds of situations, I love to quote the 21st century philosopher Shia LaBeouf. Just do it. Cold Blood the minion and hit him in the face.
Yeah, that's something that I see Muzzy doing a lot and saying, like, it's just Cold Blood generally gets 4 damage. If you have the upside of potentially getting more than 4,
yeah,
you take it, and that's what often gives Odd Rogue that extra edge. I mean, look in this scenario. Tom would have had the extra 1/1. He would have had been able to equality clear the minion, but let's say he didn't. You'd be able to push what looks like to be almost game-ending damage because your opponent would be at 15, and then you might be able to find like Leroy into like one final Cold Blood finisher, and then you're like just a few points off at that. Now it feels like you're still really far away.
I feel like Cold Blood here would have been, no, it actually wouldn't have been any extra recurring damage. So I guess in this case, not punished because the equality, he would have had an extra 1/1 on the board. It would have traded over.
But this is still a lot of damage. The second deadly poison.
Still a lot of damage. So he's got 9, 10, 11, 15, 16, 17.
Oh my goodness.
2 damage off lethal, plus he has the recurring damage of deadly poison. So Tom basically has to have,
I mean,
just has to have board clear plus Spike Ridge Steed. But there's also the argument that XiaOt wants to kill off this 1-1, because if he doesn't, then a play like...
Yeah, like a consecration weakens his push.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it keeps Blessing of Kings, like stuff like that. Like, you just want to remove it. And, you know, as much as we might sound like we were harping on XiaOt's play, his play worked out really good because of this exact scenario.
Yes.
He saw that this could be a potential window where he can set up Fungal Mancer and take it a little bit slower. And now he's completely rewarded unless Tom's able to deal with this exact board state right now.
Yeah.
Consecration!
So this is basically the exact punish for this play. Is a quality consecration. I guess a quality Avenging Wrath would have done the same thing. Because imagine if he had left the 1-1 up and daggered the face with the deadly poison. He would have put him at 2, and Tom would not have been able to do a quality consecration. He would have had to play Spike Rich Steed, and then he would have had the damage to push through.
Tom, desperate to stabilize, shuts down the Argent Squire, but no minion in the hand. Valiant to come back. That's a big deal.
Oh, jeez.
And now XiaOt's
Can he
1
draw
damage
damage?
off lethal. Firefly is not it. But you know what? It's another minion wide onto the board. However, Tom, we alluded to this a lot earlier into the matchup. Spike Rich Steed number 2 is very devastating. And XiaOt does not have much life left to play with.
Plus Blessing of Kings. He can Spike Rich Steed Blessing of Kings, push 7, set himself up for a True Silver Champion out.
Yeah.
Even if that his board gets removed, which is at this point I'm pretty sure impossible.
I don't know. Like, so if I'm XiaOt, do I even bother Deadly Poison pushing face? If I set up Firefly and it survives, it kind of gets the job done anyways. Versus if you let that 1-1 stick, what's the punish? Is it just double bless? No, even if it's Blessing of Kings number 2, it wouldn't really matter.
I think if Spike Rich Steed comes out, I mean, you're just dead anyway,
Yeah.
right? So at this point, I think you just let it live and push the damage to face. He sets himself up for an SI7 agent lethal.
Hold on to the combo.
Yeah.
Corpse Taker. Another taunt minion for Tom. And that also has lifesteal. Wait, does it? There's been a couple of Crystal Pits Kangor played throughout the series.
I don't think it's been played this game.
Okay.
But I don't know. It could have been. Who knows?
Big time draws
All right.
for Tom.
So no matter how this pans out, whether you play Spike Rich Steed or Corpse Tape, well, he's going to play
No,
Spike Rich
it's
Steed.
SI7 agent or bust.
Or Myra's into SI7 agent.
Myers into SI.
Or SI.
Yes.
And that's it.
And he's already played one SI7 agent.
Yes. So it's Myra's or the single SI. So it's a 1 out of 17 or a 1 out of 17 into a 50-50. Essentially.
16. They updated the deck counts.
1 out of 16. So it's either 1 out of 16 or a 1 out of 16 into a 50-50 because he draw about half the rest of his deck at that point. Slightly more. So very low odds for XiaOt to win.
XiaOt needs big.
Scalebane's not it.
And XiaOt with the Scalebane. You hear the audience applauding. They know what's happening. That is game 4. And tom60229 will advance to the quarterfinals.
Hometown favorite here.